Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. This is part 2 on the discussion whether it was Ishmael or Isaac that was sacrificed according to the Quran. Christian called Robert Slivio is copying and pasting from the Answering Islam website, and God willing, we will refute and debunk him here. So his contention is there's difference of opinion, it's all vague, the Islamic jurisprudence does not know whether it's Isaac or Ishmael, and there's difference of opinion, blah, blah, blah. So what we're going to do now is counter him, because we actually presented a hadith, as you know, in part 1 of the video using Answering Islam. And now Roberto wants to contend that hadith, and we will, God willing, counter him. So his basic argument is that he wanted to see the hadith, because as you know, Roberto does not have a hadith to support his case it was Isaac. He claims that the Quran is ambiguous, and he relies on commentary, but he doesn't want to go to the hadith. On the other hand, the Muslims do have a hadith, and Brother Radush Akil, he's actually quoted the hadith specifically for Roberto Slivo, which says, Mu'ayyid, Allah be pleased with him, related that a Bedouin once addressed the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, O son of the two sacrificed ones, O descendant of both Ishmael, upon be peace, and Abd Allah ibn Abdul Muttalib, whom his father had vowed to sacrifice at the Kaaba, but then he was allowed to sacrifice 100 camels instead. And the hadith finishes off by saying, Mu'ayyid said this of the two sacrifice, the other is Ishmael. So as you can see, it's Ishmael clearly stated in the hadith. One was Abdul Muttalib's son. He was going to sacrifice his own son, and the other son that is supposed to be sacrificed is Ishmael. As you can see, this is the son of Ibrahim, is the other son that was supposed to be sacrificed. So you can see the hadith clearly saying Ishmael. Now, Roberto's claim, Robert's claim is that he quotes where it says, and he claims that it is disputed and a weak hadith. He says, because it contains Abdullah Said, who is unknown, Ibn Kathir deems it Qarib Jidan, while Dahabi al-Tahqis al-Mustaraq says its chain is termly flimsy, Isnadud Wahin. Al-Suyuti in his fatwa also considers Qarib, and its chain contains unknowns. However, the fact that Ibn Hajar cites it in his Fath al-Bari suggests he considers it overall acceptable, and Allah knows best. This is a response by Brother Akil. He says its authenticity, now our Muslim response is, its authenticity is in fact debated, but great scholars of the science has given serious credence to its authenticity. And the point in mentioning to you is to show you from one the text of the Muslims take their position of Ishmael from. But here so basically Brother Radush clearly shows that it is accepted and still given authenticity. So I basically gave a sum up between the two parties. We have the Christian version, which is saying, number one, he has his version of the Quran, believes that it is ambiguous whether it mentions Isaac or Ishmael. Number two, he has no hadith, zero, to back up that it's actually Isaac. Number three, he has evidence it may be Isaac or Ishmael, disputed in tafsir. Now look at the Muslim position. The Muslim position is, number one, we have in our version of the Quran, it shows Ishmael, who is patient, one who is sacrificed is patient, and you draw the two dots together. Isaac is mentioned as Ishmael is mentioned as a patient one, and Isaac is not mentioned as a patient one. So the Quran clearly draws a connection between the one who is sacrificed, who is called patient, and Ishmael being called patient in the Quran. Number two, and yes, we have a hadith which explicitly mentions Ishmael. Even if the isnad is disputed, we still have scholars who have classified its sahih, sound. We also have tafsir, number three, we also have tafsir to support that it is Ishmael. Now you decide which side has actually more weight. Is it the Christian version or the Muslim version of the Quranic interpretation? Now, interestingly enough, Roberto quotes a claim where he assumes that the actual term patience refers to all men, all prophets. He quotes from Saifullah al-Gunaim. He quotes, and I'll read you the whole quote. More to the point, using the same argument as the opposition, one can safely say that the sacrifice was described as forbearing and steadfast in the Quran, and if we search the whole Quran, we'll find the name of Ishmael associated to patience and steadfastness, and not Isaac, which is the argument. Indeed, verse 2185 in red in picture below reads, and remember Ishmael, Idris, and Zulkifil, all men of constancy and patience. Conclusion. The sacrifice is Ishmael according to the opponent's own logic. And he quotes a response. So the response to this is, Robert says, I don't know where he's copying and pasting this from. I think it's Answering Islam. But he says, the authors again assume the conclusion they are seeking to prove, namely the Ishmael, is a forbearing child. Forbearing means patient child. 37:101 verses 37:101 of the Quran. But if one assumes that verses 37:101 refers to Isaac, then this proves that Isaac is indeed called a forbearing child in the Quran, and hence the author's argument does not hold weight. However, the Christian actually misquoted the verse in the actual Quran, where it says, and remember Ishmael, Idris, and Zulkifil, all of constancy and patience. See how they've added the word men in the as you can see here, they've added the word men. Okay, if you can see here, I'll just put it up. One moment, I'll just screenshot it. Okay, so see here how in the brackets they've put men, right? But it doesn't mean all men. I don't know who's put that in the brackets, but it's not supposed to refer to every single man. The specific is only to Ishmael, Idris, Zulkifil, of constancy and patience. This is talking about people who are at a special level of constancy and patience, and it doesn't refer to all men. It's referring to specifically those people as mentioned in the Quran. So notice how the Christian distorts this and to say, oh, it also refers to Isaac. But no, they've actually put the term men in the brackets. It doesn't refer to all men. The men here is talking about the people mentioned in line as the Quran has stated. Ishmael, Idris, Zulkifil. All of constancy and patience, not all men of constancy and patience. Well, all men could still refer to those men mentioned in that line anyway, but if you were to remove the brackets, it's talking about those for all of constancy and patience. So notice how the Christian tried to distort the text. The next argument the Christian makes is he says, furthermore, the expression forbearing is unlike the phrase good news of a son, since the later is limited to a specific promise made to a specific person. Yet the term forbearing is a quality that is true of all of God's prophets, unless the author wants to claim that other prophets like Moses and Abraham lacked patience and constancy. But notice again, he's twisted the verse of the Quran. Yes, all prophets are patient, but this verse is showing a special kind of patience, patience and constancy. So it's showing that continuous patience. Uh, so notice the Quran is making a distinction, but the Christian can't see the distinction. And I even said to him, I said, can you bring a hadith that says all prophets are patient? He can't even do that. And even according to his Bible, folks, according to his Bible, where all prophets are patient, well, if you opened up the book of Kings, 2 Kings, you see that Prophet Elijah, he was called bald-headed by children. And what happened is this was insulting for him. So he opened his hands, he prayed to God, and God sent 2 bears out, mauling 42 children. Now, does Robert still believe that all prophets are patient people? I mean, if Prophet Elijah was patient, why didn't he just tolerate what the children did? Why didn't he tell Yahweh, his God, to stop sending these bears? Why did he stay silent and watch these children get massacred in front of him? Does that show a tolerable, patient prophet? I don't think so. So, yes, it may be true that all prophets have a level of patience. However, every prophet has a different strength of qualities. A stronger patience quality is what Allah is speaking of, and that's how we actually join the dots together. And it needed extreme, extreme patience to to have a knife held to your neck, and you're looking at your father doing this to you. So Allah is speaking about a very strong particular patience. And he uses the term, the one that will be sacrificed is the one that is patient. And Allah specifically identifies Ishmael of being patient. He does not say anything like that about Isaac. Now, Robert is getting a bit desperate. He says, but you are interfering. The verse is about Ishmael. That is the whole point. It's a presupposition. And I said to him in response, we are, because it's not hard to connect the dots. It's funny how Christians go into the Quran, they find a verse where Jesus is called light, and then they find the verse where Allah is called a light in the Quran, and they connect the dots and say, look, Allah is Jesus. Yet when we go to explain to them that the light of Jesus is distinct from the light of Allah, meaning Jesus, the message he came with is a light, and that's different from Allah's personal nur, light. Christians say, oh, that's rubbish. Oh, blah, blah, blah. But then when we use the joining of the dots to Ishmael and patience and sacrifice, is one of who is patient becomes a presupposition. It just doesn't make sense. Then what Robert Silva does is he quotes Sheikh Yusuf, where he's now trying to see. He left the hadith, right? He can't really dispute against the hadith and the proper Quranic interpretation. So now he's going into appealing to commentary, and he's trying to say that early companions of the Prophet Muhammad and so forth, early Sahaba, they actually believed, and they were disputed, and 130 of them, whatever, along the whole chain said Ishmael, while others said Isaac, and so forth, right? So he's trying to say even early companions of Prophet Muhammad believed it was Isaac instead of Ishmael. My response to that would be the Prophet's statement overrides any early companion. And we have already established in the hadith that early companion of the Prophet said Ishmael. In fact, the Prophet said himself, which overrides all. And we even quoted and showed that Mu'ad, the early companions and the Sahaba and so forth, they actually did mention that it was Ismail. So if you want to refer to early Sahaba saying it's Isaac, well, there's early Sahaba that also say that it is Ismail, right? So you still lose, even if you refer to the earliest. Roberto then laughs and says, you only gave me one hadith, which is debated according to your sheikhs. And my response to him is, it's still a hadith. On the other hand, you produce nothing. And look how desperate he becomes now. So you know what Robert says? Now, he says, give me a hadith from Bukhari or Muslim. Now that's really interesting, isn't it? When you are a Christian critic and you go to answering Islam's websites to critique Islam, yet you're answering Islam, man, Mr. Sam Shimon. Do you think he only uses Muslim and Bukhari to criticize Islam? No. They use all sorts of narrations and hadiths, whether it's in Ibn Ishaq, whether it's in Abu al-Tabari, whether it's in Sunan Abu Dawood, whether it's in Tirmidhi. Do we say to them, oh, just give me Muslim and Bukhari? No. So why the double standards now? A funny Robert says, oh, it's a straw man to quote Sam Shimon and his behavior on how he treats Islam and so forth. But then Robert actually referred to Sam Shimon's papers to critique against Islam awareness pages. So why is he using Sam Shimon to critique Islam and use his rebuttals? Yet when we show that Sam Shimon uses other narrations, not just Sahih Bukhari and Muslim, he calls that a straw man. Robert then says, in reference to Sam Shimon, he says he uses your Muslim sheikhs and imams, which you have entrusted your soul to. And my response to him is, at least we have a hadith to debate about. On the other hand, you don't even have a single hadith to even present to debate. At least we still have evidence to contend with. You don't. Now, I understand you're butthurt about it, but I understand you're getting humiliated. Now, look at Robert. He says, yes, we have one hadith. Yay. Like he's mocking it to say we have one hadith. Well, hadith is actually a source that Muslims use. Regardless if we've got 50 hadith or one hadith, it's still a hadith. It's still a source that we can refer to, which is an Islamic source. Now, just imagine, folks, that there was a hadith, right? Let's turn the tables around to Robert. Just imagine that there was only one hadith, and in this hadith, Prophet Muhammad was, let's say Prophet Muhammad was claiming that Paul was actually a true apostle. Just imagine that, right? But there was no other hadith, absolutely none, right? And let's say that this hadith was debatable. Some scholars said it was authentic, some didn't. I will guarantee you, if that was the only hadith, I will guarantee you, Sam Shimon and Robert will be the first to use that against the Muslims and say, look, I understand it's disputed whether it's authentic or not. Some scholars are still saying it's authentic. And your Prophet Muhammad said Apostle Paul was a true apostle and a prophet, and it comes from Muhammad himself. I will guarantee you they'll have a field day. They will shove it down the Muslim throat, 110%, and they know it. But you see, if Muslims have got one hadith, it becomes controversial. It's only one hadith now. Again, the double standards. Okay, so now we're going to go into more detailed counter rebuttal. Remember, Robert said that his only defense was Book Tabari to actually prove that early companions actually said it was Isaac. But he actually made a huge blatant mistake. Al-Tabari is just a historian and he doesn't use isnad in his quotations. Okay, so now we'll see Robert. He actually quotes. Now we're going to take him to the task to criticize him in his quotation of Book al-Tabari. He says that the Book al-Tabari is mentioning Isaac, right? This is what apparently the early companions are saying, that it was Isaac. So the whole quotation is posted, as you can see in the screen. Abdullah Yusuf comes on stage. Mashallah, he's pretty good expert on checking the isnad and so forth. So I'll narrate what Brother Abdullah says in response to Roberto on his quotation for Book al-Tabari. Brother Abdullah understands that Book Tabari is not actually quoting isnad for the narration, and he shows Robert that he's making a blunder when he's claiming that Book Tabari is actually authentic. Remember, Robert went and accused our narration of not being authentic and it's being disputed, and Robert appeals to Book al-Tabari, claiming that there are companions who actually agreed that it was Isaac. However, Book al-Tabari is not authentic and it doesn't follow an isnad back to the Prophet, a chain of narrations. And Brother Abdullah points this out to Robert. And Brother Abdullah points out to Robert saying, where's the isnad, in which we have words hadsana, akrama, and, which specify the person he heard the narration come from. And then Robert says, I was quoting Tabari, so it's not my problem. It's a fabricated narration. So, he's quoting, Robert acknowledges that it could be a fabricated narration. Robert then quotes, here is a tafsir from famous tafsir Arabic, al-Baghawi. And I think he's trying to quote the isnad over there. But Brother Abdullah says to him, what a big ignorant liar you are. There are no chain of narrators specifying who got the news from and who you are quoting is proof. Tabari is filled with fabricated accounts. On the other hand, you said that hadith provided by Brother, obviously Mustafa and Radush, is weak. On what basis you said it is weak? So he calls our hadith that we presented weak, yet Robert is quoting Book Tabari and it doesn't even have an isnad. And then Robert quotes al-Baghawi, who says it's Isaac, who's another scholar, and Abdullah responds back and says, wrong, totally blunder. Baghawi didn't say it was Isaac. He is quoting Al-Hasan, and Hassan said it was Ishmael. So he actually made a lie to say Al-Baghawi was actually saying it was Isaac. And then Robert says, is your Muslim sheikhs and scholars such as Tabari fabricating stuff? And Abdullah then responds back and says, another blunder. Tabari does not fabricate hadith. He was a muhaddis. His job was to nakul, and sanad means copy the narration and copy the sanad. That's what almost all muhaddisin did. Now it's your job to see the sanad to check its validity. Look how silly Robert is. He says, yes, he copied the sanad. Don't you think Tabari checked the narrations before he did? Or are you assuming he just put it there without checking? Abdullah then responds back to Robert saying, in his muhaddith of tafsir and tariq, he said, I will not check the sanad. My job is to only collect every single thing. And that's what he did. I think it's mentioned on page 8 of Tabari's book in his opening statement. He said, the things that we mention in his book do not attribute us. We're only narrating what we heard from previous people. So Al-Tabari was just a historian. He didn't check the isnad of the information that he was collecting. And then Abdullah says to Robert, most of the muhaddisin wrote muhaddama in which they specify what they're going to do and what they will collect and how they will collect it. Moreover, many times, like Muhaddis Ibn Hajar, copy a sanad, but grade it sahih, but it's not sahih. He made tasuma, means mistake in grading it correctly. So we go to the Imams of Hadith criticism to see the jara on each narration to verify its validity. We can't trust Ibn Hajar on every single narration. These are basic principles of Hadith criticism. You know what Robert says in response? He says, okay, but I have no clue how to check on that. I don't have access to the narrations. So earlier, he was claiming Tabari has got narrations, it's got isnad, it's got proof, and he was using that against Muslims to say, there's narrations in there quoting Isaac. Yeah, now he's confessing to Brother Abdullah, I have no clue how to check on that. I don't have access to narrations. Look how easily he was put in his place. SubhanAllah. Brother Abdullah had to remind Robert and says, if you really want sincerely learn it, then be sincere and follow the truth wherever it leads you. Don't be an Orientalist like Arthur Jeffrey, who did blunder in his book on narrations. Abdullah even corrected Robert and reminded him to say at least first even read the basics of hadith criticism instead of directly quoting narrations now from Tariq Tabari. You provided nothing more than chunk of narrations in which narrators don't even specify who they got their information from whom. Funny, Robert then says, it is not my job to do that. As I said, I have no access to these narrations. So he says he has no access to these narrations, meaning he's got no access to the isnad. So if you don't have access to find out whether their chain of narrations are authentic, why do you even quote them? So what does he do next? He says here, Shabir also mentions Tabari. So he sends a link, and I'll put the hyperlink below this video. So look at the deceitful lie, what he does. He quotes Brother Shabir Ali, who's a Muslim apologist, who also apparently quotes Tabari. So he's basically trying to give credit he's basically saying Shabir Ali gives credit to book Tabari by quoting it. And when you go to the video, this liar Robert, you know what he does? He completely misquotes Shabir Ali. And I'll post the video below. You can see the video for yourself. Shabir Ali never once actually gives credit to Tabari on his narration about quoting and saying that Isaac is the sacrificial son. It doesn't even say that. In fact, Shabir Ali says that Tabari got his information from the Jews because he was a historian, so obviously he's going to mention Isaac. However, Shabir Ali says in the same video that Al-Suyuti has more authority, that he actually says Al-Suyuti's version is more correct, and Suyuti actually quotes Ishmael to be the sacrificial son, not Isaac. So Robert actually lied by quoting Shabir Ali, trying to assume Shabir was giving credit to Tabari, when in fact he was giving credit to Al-Suyuti. Robert then responds to me. He says, I never said he gave credit, which means Shabir Ali giving credit to Tabari. And I said to him, you're a liar. You actually brought up Shabir Ali to reference Tabari to give Shabir the authority for us to refer to him because he's a Muslim apologist. So why would you actually do that? So you're being... Robert says, because we're talking about him and some Muslims have accused him of fabricating stuff, meaning Tabari. I said to him, Robert, you are a liar, really scummy actually. I said, you weren't talking about Shabir Ali. You brought you just basically brought Shabir Ali out of thin air when you had no authority left besides Tabari. So give me a break. You are a true serpent that has been caught lying, trying to falsify, and use Shabir Ali to say he quotes Tabari. If you were honest, you would have said Shabir also quotes Al-Suyuti, which you didn't. This liar, Robert says, the only thing I said was that he, meaning Shabir, mentioned Tabari. The rest is you assuming something I never said. Well, that's just stupid. Why would you quote Shabir Ali quoting Tabari? You're obviously trying to give Shabir Ali the authority and the credit to say, even look, your Muslim apologist is quoting Tabari. Why else would you say he's quoting Tabari? Why didn't you say he's quoting Suyuti? Because that's what he actually did in the video, and you posted the video because you didn't even watch the video. You were lying and being deceitful, thinking that Shabir was only giving credit to Tabari when he wasn't. He was actually giving credit to Suyuti. So you are an idiot. Honestly, you are. Now, this part's really, really funny. Robert is referring to Gabriel Said Reynolds. He's referring to people like Yusuf Ali as scholarship, but Brother Abdullah said that these are just your secular liberalistic scholars. None of the scholars accept him as an authority, and because he didn't study ulum, that is a big problem. And Brother Abdullah Yusuf says, we have great grand muhaddisin like Abbas Razi, Al-Shafi Jalali, Faisal Khan, Amjad Al-Zami, Ahmed Raza, Ilyas Gunman, and tons of others. And he says, these are the prominent authorities, not your liberalistic scholars. And Robert is referring to all of these new liberal scholars who are disputing to say it was actually Isaac. But notice, and this is a question that I actually raised to Robert, and it seems like he's running away from it. I said to him, bro, it's funny how Robert is now no longer referring to the early scholars of Islam, the earliest scholars, but now he's referring to modern day secular liberalistic scholars to prove his case. So notice how we shift. Before, he was trying to promote how Book al-Tabari has the earliest scholars of Islam agreeing to Isaac being the sacrifice, when there was no isnad for that. It was actually proven wrong, and it was fabricated. There was no backing to that in in Book al-Tabari. So what does Robert do? He then refers to later modern scholars who are secular liberalistics, the ones in the West. I mean, how desperate can you get? He was accusing us to say, oh, we have early scholars, but then he lost that debate now, and now he's gone to modern secular liberalistic sidekicks. So in conclusion, folks, what do we have? We had Robert trying to refer and dispute that the Quran is vague. We actually proved him wrong there and showed him the connection, and we joined the dots of the term patience, which referred to Ishmael, and that was the son that was sacrificed. Then additionally, we referred to the hadith, and Robert then disputed that and said, oh, it's weak. There are some scholars who dispute it, when there were actual scholars, when there are scholars that actually classified it sahih. And then Robert's last option out was to then refer to Book Tabari and say Al-Tabari shows the earliest companions who actually agree that it was Isaac. We actually showed him that there was no isnad to Book Al-Tabari. It was fabricated. In defense, he tried to bring up Shabir Ali, and he misquoted Shabir Ali. He thought that Shabir Ali was giving credit to Book al-Tabari, when the actual video, and I'll post a video below, Shabir Ali was completely misquoted. Shabir Ali was quoting al-Suyuti and giving him credit, and where al-Suyuti said it was Ishmael, not Isaac, and that Shabir Ali made it clear that al-Tabari was just copying as a historian, what the early Jews used to say, that it was Isaac. So he completely butchered Tabari's position and Shabir Ali's position. And then on top of that, he understood that Al-Tabari doesn't have a single backing of Isnad. Then what did he do? He referred to modern scholars. He couldn't no longer refer to the classical and the earlier scholars. He then referred to modern scholars. And we know that these modern liberalistic scholars, one or two of them, a handful of them, they're not compared to the authority and the giants of Islam. So there you go, folks. This is the desperate Robert that got completely debunked, refuted on all his lies, And all he had in his defense is no Quran, no Hadith, no classical scholar and uh, companion, early companion, where we had early companions mentioning through the hadith that it was Ishmael. The only thing he had at the end was a modern scholar, some modern scholar in the West somewhere agreeing with him. Allahu Akbar. Well done to, I want to give a great hand of applause to brother Abdullah Yusuf. We couldn't do this video if it wasn't possible for your contribution. Thank you very much, and please add me, and we will work together, inshallah. Fantastic. Brother Abdullah Yusuf did a fantastic job in exposing the isnad. Thank you for listening. Goodbye and good day. Robert says in the end, yes, I got smoked by 2 professors of Islam. Goodbye, Robert.